Oh.
Or not.
Hey, everybody. You're listening to and watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Bryan Pittard.
And I'm Steve Morey.
And as if you couldn't tell, it's spooky Halloween time.
If you are not watching this, you are missing something so spectacular. Bill is wearing this. It's a skull. It's like a pirate skull.
It's a pirate skull skeleton thing,
but with eyes that look like aliens or very old man sunglasses.
Just creepy.
It's creeptastic.
Yeah, enough of that.
Oh my God! Put it back on.
What happened?
Stuck here. Hold on. Talk amongst yourselves.
So yeah, it's spooky. October the 29th as we record this.
Halloween Eve.
Spooky. Penultimate
Halloween.
Halloween.
Well, as we were saying and intimating there, we are going to be dedicating some of our bandwidth tonight to scary stories that we dig from comic books. We're also going to be talking about some current books that we're enjoying. I have to ask you guys, what is Halloween going to be like around you? Because for us, it's a dud. I mean, they're asking us to put candy outside for kids. You know, given the pandemic, I completely understand that. There's going to be a socially distant Halloween parade in the next town over that most of the neighboring towns are invited to, where you can like throw candy at kids as they walk down the street. Or
sign me up.
Yeah,
some candy at kids.
They don't specify
or they can
how
come up to you and get candy in there. Yeah.
Do they specify how large the candy cannot be?
No.
Come here, kid.
But basically,
get like a jawbreaker and whop it.
Jawbreakers.
Some little
frozen
brat, like
full-size Snickers, just frozen.
I had a moment today where I almost pelted Trump supporters on the side of the road. I didn't, just put that out there. But in terms of throwing things at people who, maybe they do deserve it, maybe they don't. Mm-hmm. They were at an intersection, and I pulled up, and I had to sit there and and this is outside of Seattle, but pretty far north of Seattle. And I had an apple that I was eating. How very Washington, right? And I was finishing it up, and I'm like, I could just peg it, but I didn't. They had the signs. They were being disgusting, but I didn't do it. So I wouldn't throw candy at kids. I would not. I would not intentionally try to harm a child with candy. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it's such a downer year. Like we didn't even get the Halloween decorations out.
Yeah,
and I was like, look, this is the only thing I have that was easy to get is like Snoopy with pumpkin.
That's cute.
It's the most macabre Snoopy.
Well, have we talked about the fact that the Great Pumpkin isn't on broadcast TV?
I don't think so. And I in terms of, okay, let me say what I'll say first. Okay. I get that people are a little upset, but as somebody who is a enthusiast of home video and home record, and physical media, you really have nothing to complain about. And given everything that's going on in the world, in terms of ranking, that's like super seriously low.
It's
like I get it because we've been used to it being, and for some people, I imagine the Peanut stories, apart from possibly local news, are the only time they watch terrestrial television during a year. I get it, but there's ways around it. Set yourself up for a free Apple TV trial.
Yeah.
In the window, and plus they're also going to be broadcast for free during certain periods. So
free for non-subscribers from October 30th to November 1st. So if you really have to watch it, you can watch it for free on Apple TV Plus.
Yeah. And I've never really liked the Great Pumpkin one. I like the Thanksgiving and the Christmas. I never really liked the Great Pumpkin.
I think I like the pumpkin one better than the other two, but I did like the Christmas one a lot. I vaguely remember the Thanksgiving one.
What do you think, macabre Snoopy? He likes them more.
Have you seen the meme going around though from the Great Pumpkin where it's what is it, Linus and what's the Charlie's brother or sister?
Sally.
Sally. And it's something like, "Oh, you just got me out here so I could suck your dick."
Yeah, I've seen that.
I think that's like of all the pop culture misappropriations, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah,
I've never seen that meme, but that's good.
And especially with the election, some of the Smith's lyrics as Peanuts they have been making the rounds again.
Oh no. That's great pairing.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great. It's a great blog of. I think it's called Charlie Brown versus the Smiths, and they take Peanuts panels and they put Smith's lyrics to them, and some of them are like genius.
Beautiful.
I mean, actually, some like Peanuts strips themselves, like the original strips, could be pretty much like Smiths, like illustrations of Smith songs. Like this right here is something that Morrissey is whining about, but illustrated, because pretty much that's
the thing is, though, Charlie Brown wasn't a whiner. Oh, it looks like we lost Bryan there.
We've lost a Bryan.
I'm sure we'll get him back, unless he's going to come back in a more macabre version of himself.
He's a ghost! It's a ghost!
So,
I don't know what. Do not even know what just happened. It just
possibly a poltergeist.
Oh, there was a goosing involved.
Well, Bryan, you are in a very scary area when you weigh things like like weird animal sightings and serial killers.
It's
the
so
Pacific
funny.
Northwest is a bit much.
I never knew or appreciated that because I think when I knew that was the case, I didn't think, oh, I'll be living in Seattle someday. Didn't even register as a possibility in my life. Then I move out here, and I've since forgotten all of it, and everything is Bigfoot out here. There's so much Bigfoot stuff, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Serial killers, zoocryptid or whatever stuff, and UFOs.
UFOs, yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. Yeah. I'm fine with that. None of that freaks me out. Serial killers may be the most of all of them, but keeping it weird. That's what we're doing.
And here in North Carolina, all we have is racism.
That scares me a lot more.
Long-standing historical.
I don't think the South has. Have you been to South Boston? Don't think the South has a monopoly on that.
No. Hey, I've done the Freedom Trail, and I've understood the irony.
Speaking of things tangled in with that, though, this time next week, who knows? Who knows? I'm just so exhausted. I'm mentally exhausted. I'm not sleeping as much as I should be. It's amazing. It's just amazing.
I am both excited and horrified of what is to come.
Yep.
And I mean that in every outcome, not like just
Mm-hmm.
one person win, one person does, like all of the things in the next.
All of the down ballot. Have you guys seen the clips of John Ossoff against David Perdue?
No.
Oh God, you guys got to see that. Like Ossoff basically tells him to his face, "You're a crook." Because he has had multiple investigations about insider trading, and it was one of the most effective debate performances. I ended up watching a half an hour of it, and I can't vote in that, and it just seems that I want to be. I'm cautiously optimistic. Even today, Texas officially became a toss-up state. Because of the the throngs of young voters, on average in the states it's 300%, I think, uptick from 2016. In Texas, it's something like 620% more.
Wow.
Registration. So and here's Steve to harsh our bliss, but and I know we are up against crooks. But I have some degree of hope that this will work out okay.
Did you see my post? I think you did. I had a conversation today that was very politically charged, which I am as a government employee not supposed to ever do at work. But this was technically not at work. It was, we were, at lunch or whatever. But I apologized afterwards because they were all fairly conservative, older men, retired military, Navy specifically. And I thought, oh my God, here I am just outing myself as this big whatever, threw the gay card in with it, the whole nine. And
hello.
They were very giving me the Fox News talking points about Biden, the Bidens and all this emails and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, sure, okay, but his emails, right? But then after that whole thing, and we kind of agreed to disagree, whatever, we were fine.
No.
One of the guys comes over to me, and he's probably in his late 60s. He's like, hey, I just want you to know, very privately, away from them. He's like, I will never vote for Trump because I have a gay son. And I absolutely agree that he is trash. And even though, he has to sort of have that bravado among his cohorts and, fellow military, he's like, not going to happen. So it was a small moment in my life that I cling to now.
Interesting. That's kind of like the counter argument for all the doom and gloom, and or of course Trump's going to get elected because there's so many secret Trump voters. They're just so embarrassed to say anything because we know that Trump voters, more than anyone else, are extremely shy and reserved in their opinions and have absolutely do not like to call attention to themselves in any way, shape, or form. Not wearing a mask or wearing a red hat or
that group on the corner. None of them had masks. They were all in this little gaggle, and none of them had masks.
Well, that's because that's their bubble, and they really want you to respect that they've worked really hard in their bubble. They've all been tested, I'm sure, multiple times.
Yeah.
I also went down the COVID-19 bubble, that rabbit hole today.
Don't.
Well, it started with an article about one thing I have is I have a vitamin D deficiency, so I take supplemental vitamins to do that. And apparently, there are studies now that a vitamin D deficiency is incredibly important, almost to the level of a comorbidity. So, if this study is correct, people get some vitamin D, specifically vitamin D3. Very good for the system.
The bigger the D, wait a minute now.
We all know that. We all know that. And then there's they had some data from the University of Illinois about how they employed COVID testing. And basically, again, a campus is it's a microcosm, it's a bubble, but basically they were very effective in contact tracing, in quarantining people that had exhibited symptoms, and I think it's out of the major schools, it's the lowest COVID rate anywhere. So we can do it. We can get this under control. But not right now.
Yeah. Oh well. Just stay inside.
2020 is spooky than any other Halloween before. Just as a year, this has just been crap.
It'll be my. It's actually part of that is my woof of the week. Actually, that 2020, kind of explaining why it's so crazy and bad. I'm sure that at least one of you has already seen it, but yeah, I'll talk about it in my whiff of the week.
Okay. So what do you guys want to do? Do you want to do our horror books first? Or do you want to do the new books first?
I think we start with the new books to go to the horror books.
Yeah, that works.
All right, let's go through the mechanism that we usually do, starting with Steve. Steve, tell us about a recent book that you're digging.
So a couple weeks ago, I randomly, or last week, I guess, randomly picked up the latest Killjoys series, #1. So the True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys National Anthem, which is the latest volume, written by Gerard Way and Sean Simon, art by Leonardo Romero, and colors by Jordi Belair, with Nate Picos on lettering. And I had to write this down because I like how they put this. Nate Picos of Blambot. So I guess the art house for that is called Blambot. I really enjoyed this. read the original Fabulous Killjoys a long time ago. It's been a while since this has come out. I mean, since the original series came out. So there's not a lot that I remember. And so for me, it was kind of like picking up the book almost without any real expectations about what I'm going to see or read. And I'm really happy I did. I'm really happy that I just kind of, I'll pick that up. I think I kind of vaguely remember liking Killjoys. I loved it. It's probably the best series to compare it to would be Morrison's The Invisibles. It's wacky. There's a lot of absurdity, and pretty much everything is just in-your-face commentary on the state of consumerism and the general ideas of a populace kind of zombified into sort of just living a normalized, boring, everyday existence without questioning reality. And the idea of the Killjoys, the AKAs, is to specifically fight against the forces that are creating this kind of population. So the book itself focuses on Mike Milligram, who's one of these Killjoys. Mike explains sort of through flashbacks that Killjoys themselves are more or less created from the toss-offs of society, the trash, the people who are forgotten, orphans, committed people, homeless, etc., that are sort of rescued from that existence, and then from this secret organization run by a mother and father are taught to see behind the veil of reality, to be so completely separate from reality that they can see all the cracks. They have toy guns that actually fire. They have different anti-tech tech that makes their faces unrecognizable, just wearing silly masks or crazy costumes that at the same time where they stand out, it also allows them to fade into the background. And for good reason, they're these sort of demonic, sort of tech alien creatures that are manipulating society. It's very much a kind of in the vein of They Live as well. They have the ability to see sort of like the crazy, screwy, disgusting reality behind what looks like, a regular person or a regular criminal. This all gets explained. There's a lot of exposition here. So if you didn't know anything about the Killjoys, you get a crash course pretty quickly. And in a $4 book, there is a lot of pages in this one. It's definitely worth the $4 or however much you would pay at your LCS. But tragedy strikes at a big meeting of all the different AKA teams, the Killjoys themselves, as well as the Pristines, the Lorettas, the Sadie Hawkins, the Books on Tape, all these crazy different groups that have their own sort of gimmick. There's a friendly firefight. Things just break out and go crazy when they realize that they're being told that they're no longer necessary, which obviously nobody really believes that. Flash forward a bit, and Mike appears to be living a regular life. He's no longer Mike Milligram. He's got job offers that are coming through. He works as a stock boy in a supermarket where there are no advertisements anymore. Everything is just cereal, beer, bread, whatever, which seems kind of strange. It's almost like anti-They Live, where it's all just sort of like black and white, subliminal messages. This one, the messages is gone. The messages are gone. It just, things are the way they are. There's nothing, there's no context, there's no subtext, there's no metaphor anymore. And his life seems to be going down the tubes, but he starts to get his sight back, and he starts to experience the craziness that came with being a Killjoy. And as he does, his memory starts coming back. So it's a really interesting setup. Obviously, something's going to go crazy now that, he's been pulled away from that life, but now he's coming back. And obviously, it's almost a situation where these sort of demonic forces that want to re-normalize everything have more or less won. And he has to find a way to fight his way back and to at least try to bring the fight back to these forces of evil and complacency. So really excellent book. The art's great. There's some wonderful jokes, but the colors, I do have to say, and I know it's kind of hard to see on this, but the colors are just gorgeous. The art and just the design of the book is a lot of fun. There's some great little jokes here and there. There's some great little references. He's a big Ramones fan, and he notices or he realizes that his Ramones records have been replaced by the Raymonds, and the lyrics have now been turned into doo-wop for different Ramones songs. So it's, just interesting little things are mixed in here that, that kind of are like old school Gerard way. He likes to mix in a lot of these references, but really good book. If you love the Invisibles, if you love the original Killjoys, I think you're really going to enjoy National Anthem. And if you want something weird, it's pretty cool. I don't know. Has anybody else read anything by any of the Killjoys books? Oh, it is put out by Dark Horse.
I lasted one issue with Killjoys.
Yeah.
Just didn't. And, again, like it should hit my sweet spots. It just didn't,
Well,
in a way that I would say similarly minded books, not necessarily similar books, but similarly minded books like Phonogram did. Just in terms of the rock aesthetic being central to the conception of the book. Yeah, for some reason, it just didn't work for me.
It's too bad. Well, I mean, again, everybody's got their tastes. But for anybody who kind of likes that sort of rock or punk aesthetic in their comics, this might be something to just check out. And again, if you buy the first issue, digitally or in floppy and you don't like it, you're out $4.
Okay. Brian's smiling. All right, Brian, we're going to throw it over to you. Tell us about something that you're digging that's recent.
So I have been very bad at keeping up with DC lately. I am apologetic because I do love, in many ways, I do love more of what's going on in DC than I do in maybe what's going on with Marvel. But with some exceptions, of course, like X-Men. The Rorschach solo title from Tom King and Jorge Fernandez. Did I say that right? Is really quite unexpected. Like, I heard it was coming, didn't learn anything about like what was going to be involved, just kind of kept myself in the dark. It's funny, I just actually did a rewatch of the Watchmen TV series on HBO with my boyfriend who had never seen it and who had never read Watchmen the comic. So I was really interested in seeing both how it watched in a second watch and how much he got out of it, given that he didn't have that experience. Fornes? Okay, Fornes. I don't know why I had extra accent, extra syllable in there. Bonus. Anyway, so I started this, and if you've read this, and I actually don't want to spoil too much, only because I think it's better to kind of go in cold in this. The first couple pages are not what you think you're going to read. Let's just say that this book is a murder mystery, at least in part. I'm sure it could go somewhere else, but and Tom King definitely loves him a sort of procedural with a twist. He's done that for a few different things, I think, using a different kind of storytelling structure like a procedural in a superhero context, and in this case, it's really interesting and it works, and it's set in the Watchmen universe of the comics. I don't know that it's related to the TV series at all. I don't think it is, but there is a reference to what happened in Oklahoma. So I was kind of like, wait, does that? I need to go back and reread like the real Watchmen and see if there's like something I've forgotten.
I can comment on that later.
Oh, perfect, good. I don't have the screen sharing set up, easily, but even the cover, I think this is maybe feels like it's a Mitch Gerard's cover, but is really cool. It's like this awesome like thumbprint with Rorschach there. So yeah, set in 2020. It's got completely like unknown, like a cast of unknowns minus Rorschach, at least so far. Again, so there's little moments where as you're going through the story, which is following this detective who is investigating a murder, you see little moments of Watchmen like references, like Easter eggs more than anything. But if you're a fan of Watchmen, or if you've even like watched the TV show, you're gonna get some of it. I think some of it you're totally gonna be like, whoa, I don't know what this is, but whatever. It's beautiful. The art by Fornes is perfect. Like, I loved the Before Watchmen series that DC did, most of it. I also really enjoyed Doomsday Clock as a kind of Watchmen sequel with the art by, what's his name? Not coming to me. I'll think of it in a minute. But yeah, I think they've all.
I kept saying Gary Frank. Sorry.
No. You're right. Thank you. I hope that you guys would help me there. My outboard brain here. But yeah, no, Gary Frank. They all do a great Dave Gibbons without being Dave Gibbons, and without like they're trying to blend with Dave Gibbons. They're not trying to replace Dave Gibbons. They're trying to make it fit in the visual tone and look and feel of the original comic without really just trying to do that. Thank you, David Toby, because of our delay, but probably very quickly gave me the answer as well. Anyway, so Gary Frank, I love that series too. But yeah, so Muted Palette, Dave Stewart did the colors, fantastic. I don't know where this is going to go. And I think that's what's almost as exciting as that first episode of the Watchmen TV series. You're like, I know this is related to the Watchmen comic that we probably love, but I don't know how it connects necessarily yet. I mean, there's one obvious connection, but it's there's a kind of a blank slate, at least for this adventure and mystery to go. And I like the excitement of that. The second issue may be completely underwhelming. Tom King usually does not disappoint. I don't think I've read any of his pieces, his works, and thought, well, that's shit. I've been like a little disappointed maybe in this and that. I actually just caught up on Strange Adventures, and there's some things there that I'm a little mixed about, let's say, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, at some point. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really interested. Did you guys read this yet?
It hasn't come in my box yet. That's in my next box. One thing I did want to say was when Tom King got the assignment, one thing he said about in the structure was in telling the Rorschach story that it wouldn't contradict anything, whether your Watchmen experience is the original graphic or the original series, Before Watchmen, the film, or the TV series. So there will be references to all four of those throughout the series, apparently, cool. So that you can plug this into any version of Watchmen that's familiar to yourself, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And also, just to give credit where credit's due, the cover you were talking about is actually the comic artist Jorge Fornes.
Oh, that's Fornes as well. Okay.
Yeah.
He's doing it in a very different style than the interior.
Yes.
But
it's almost like a graphics from a 70s like crime series, like the intros, like Mannix. At least from the images that we've seen so far. I don't know why I said Mannix, that one. Mannix.
Well, at least it wasn't She's the Sheriff,
That was later, brother.
70s?
She's the Sheriff was the 80s.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Steve, have you read this yet?
The more you know.
Ding, 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 ding. No, I haven't read it yet. I do plan on eventually checking it out. I might wait until they're all released. I'm not really sure. Do you know how many issues it's planned? Is it a 12 issue maxi?
12.
Or...
Most of his stuff has been 12 issues.
He does that,
yeah.
Okay.
I will also say that I know I did read like one interview, and I believe he is doing some things with like how in Strange Adventures there's sort of this quote thing he does where it's like comics pros quotes. I think we've talked about it before. I feel like that meta commentary on the comics creator as an industry is also in this comic. I don't want to say how or why yet, because again, it's David Toby for the win here. 12. That is 12 issues. Thank you, David. I feel like he's doing something with a certain curator that once maybe a couple more issues comes out, we'll talk more about it and be a little more spoilery. But I do think it really shocks you and makes you go, wait, what? What is this? Huh? Okay. Yeah. But like the first, so again, rewatching Watchmen, that first episode is so good because it ends with such a shock and such a right turn that it propels you into what then follows. So yeah, I would be really interested if anybody else reads this. Please let us know what you think. And yeah, like I said, when more have come out and we can really delve into it. Steve, I think you're right. Tom King is best experienced like dense comic book material.
Yeah,
together.
In chunks.
See, that's funny. I feel
chunks.
very differently.
Yeah?
I feel very differently. I like the breaks. Sometimes it means I'm filing back to the issue before just to refresh, but I like he's one of those writers that I like that there's a month break between everything. There are certain things I like to mainline. He's not one of them for some reason. I think that's one of the reasons why I've never gotten through Vision, because I didn't read it contemporaneously. And at this point, I've only gotten through the 4th issue.
Oh, well, one of the things, like the last complete series that I've read of Tom King's, because I've been following along in Strange Adventures, but, a couple issues behind. And of course, there's a big pause for COVID earlier. But the last one that I read sort of serialized was Heroes in Crisis. And I think that the nature of that comic and the way he wrote and his rhythm in that, I really enjoyed it up to about halfway through. And then by issue 6 and 7, I kind of was like, I have to finish this now because I've been reading it for the past half a year. And I think that if I had read it all at once, I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more. It would have taken me less time, obviously, but I think I wouldn't have built up all these expectations and then had those sort of expectations like slowly wound down over time. I would have been able to keep that excitement up if I had read it sort of all in one go. But yeah, different strokes.
We have some comments from the Peanut Gallery. No offense intended here. Chris Wybrew really enjoyed.
Hey Tracy, hey Chris, how you doing?
So that's cool. And then we have our friend David here as well, who I think is agreeing with me. It sounds like.
Oh no, it sounds like he's.
Well, no, he's saying
saying me. He's agreeing with me.
He's agreeing with both of us because he says his newer stuff is better mainlined. Oh wait, you're right. Wait, no, I'm saying mainline.
I said I tried mainlining Vision and I only got through the 4th issue.
Yep. So he's agreeing with both of you there.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I guess.
Thank you. Way to go, David. Thanks for agreeing with both of us.
Thanks for being diplomatic.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we should talk about Strange Adventures at some point because I know it's a book we're all reading. And I'm with you, Bryan. There's some moments in it where I'm like my head scratching, and there's other moments that I think are just poetic beauty.
When it all lays flat, I really feel like it'll be a good moment to kind of talk about what it is and what it means.
Yeah.
Because there's certainly moments where I think, oh, it's this.
Yeah.
And then I read the next issue, I'm like, oh no, that's not it at all. It's something else.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that a lot.
Okay, so I guess it's on me now to talk about the current book that I'm talking about. And I initially intended on a completely different book. I've been a very big fan of Jim Rugg for a long time. Whether it was the Plain Janes and Janes in Love with Cecil Castellucci and in the Minx imprint that DC had for a while, or Aphrodisiac, or the collected Super Mag, which is effectively an art book, one of the best fanzines of all time in Rambo 3.5. His stuff is I always look forward to him, but this is his latest work, which is 1976 Octobriana, and I thought if I did a review from only experiencing this once, that it would have been a disservice. When you're talking about colors, brother, he's like no other. I'm probably messing up with the mic there, but just a stunning artist. And if you want to sample his stuff on the cheap, Image, as part of the Image First, has Street Angel, the first chapter. as a
Stream
buck.
Eagle is
So
so good.
yeah, so that's a
So good.
really good way to sample and see if his stuff is to your liking or not. I think it should be, but and again, 1976 Octobriana is a story about Soviet Russia and this group called the PPP and their philosophies and the introduction of this woman. I still don't know exactly what it's about, but I have to return to it and I have to do it properly. So that was initially what I was intending to talk about. So I transitioned over to something else, and on the last few episodes, I think I'm trying to think what I I guess apart from Hedra, it's mostly been DC or Marvel that I've been talking about. So I wanted to talk about something that wasn't big two, but kind of in that ambit. And I found the perfect book for that, and that's Skulldigger and Skeleton Boy from the world of Black Hammer, written by Jeff Lemire with art by Tonsi Zanuck. Zanjik, if I'm butchering it, my apologies. It's a story that takes place in 1996. Again, all the Black Hammer stories, or basically each miniseries has been from a different time period. And what you have here is the story of Skulldigger, who is a vigilante who's operating, as I said, in the mid 90s. He has no qualms about killing. It's all bad people that he's killing, but he's still killing them. So he is up against the police department of Spiral City, where this takes place. However, again, even among the police, there's dissension. There's some that just say leave it alone, including most of the bosses, because he is clearing the decks. But there are also cops that are dedicated to the rule of law and saying this is a vigilante and should be captured. The Skeleton Boy of the title here is someone who witnessed the murder of his parents, and then Skulldigger comes and murders the murderer. So in some ways, it's a Bruce Wayne analog. But if there's one character that really influences Skulldigger, it's Punisher. And in this series, there's been 5 that's been published so far. It's a 6-issue series. I have 4 of them. It's one of the best just like Alan Moore Supreme or some of the best Superman stories ever. This is one of the best Punisher stories ever. There is a Joker-esque serial killer crime boss in Spiral City called Grim Jim. There's a connection between Skulldigger and Grim Jim, which is quite shocking. That happens. The reveal is in the 3rd issue. As Steve has mentioned earlier about another series, there was a break in the COVID action. So issues 1, 2, and 3 were out by February, but this one didn't come out until September for the 4th issue. Tonsi Zanuck's art is somewhat Darwin Cook, somewhat more streamlined than that. It's a nice mix. I'll show you a page here, which I think is really effective with Skulldigger watching TV. And I have to say, out of all the worlds that have come out, I would say in the last 5 years, I think the Black Hammer contingent has been one of the more effective ones. I don't think there's been any miniseries that has not been worth it. Looking forward to the next one, which was Colonel Weird's Cosmogog, which I think came out today. Possibly the first issue came out today. So again, if you like your superheroes, but on a little bit of meth, go over to Black Hammer. It's such a worthwhile trip, and this series just has not disappointed at all. And it was a bit of a binge there. I held off on the 4 issues, read them all at once. Part of me is wishing I had collected the 5 and 6, but this was just something that was speaking to me from this box here. And, of the to read, and definitely liked it. Steve, have you been reading this?
I have. I actually read issue number 5, came out this month. So I guess we just have the 1 issue left. I've been enjoying it. This is, and this sounds like a diss, but it is the least favorite of the Black Hammer books that I've read in the Black Hammer miniseries. but that still makes it kind of better than a lot of other books that come out because it's still Black Hammer. And I think you kind of, mentioned the character. I'm not a big Punisher fan. That kind of 90s, amoral violence for, in the service of the greater good never really appealed to me. Or at least not so much anymore anyway. But I like the way that Lemire is writing Skulldigger here because he really taps into the humanity of the character. You do get like the hyper violence. You do get sort of this, nihilistic philosophy where they're better off dead or, whatever. But I think he kind of pulls it together by comparing Skulldigger's philosophy to the philosophy of the cop that's pursuing him and the young boy, and also sort of the an interesting contrast to and I can't remember the character's name, but he is the I guess Silver Age hero that Rex something who's involved early on in Skulldigger's life, and as you said, there's kind of a reveal about that in issue 3 and 4, but also he's now an unmasked superhero running for office, and it's interesting, sort of the how his outlook contrasts so differently to Skulldigger's, and the connection between the two, you would kind of think like maybe some of that rubbed off on Skulldigger, not at all. So it's very interesting, and I like that contrast. I also like that the connection between Skulldigger, the cop, and the little boy as well. So it's very interesting how Lemire's playing it, and the art, like you said, there's a little bit of Samney in there as well. I think it's just a very interesting. Like there's a lot of contrast. There's a lot of like expressionists. Like here's bold, dark shadows, and like this cuts this scene. Like you see this character in stark relief against everything else, and then sometimes it smooths out a little bit, and you get a more cinematic, like 70s cinematic feel to it, which is really cool. And I like it. Again, least favorite of all the Black Hammer books, but it's still head and shoulders above so many other things. So.
And I'll just have to interject here because it's such a great Silver Age name. The character that you were thinking of was the Crimson Fist. It's just such a great Silver Age superhero name. And one thing I also did like in this world of kind of comparing coming out as a superhero to coming out as gay. I thought that was a nice just a nice dynamic that they had there, and how that was discussed in the first issue, because there probably would be some similarities if we actually did have these people inhabit our world. So, yep. All right, so cool. Skulldigger, Billy, the art that the first. I'm a huge fan of Third Eye light posters that glow in the dark, and some of those pages I've seen them. I need to get a copy. Yep. Okay. Yep. Yes, you do. Street Angel for $1, Octobrion in 1976 for $10. Yeah.
Anything Jim Rugg, just go ahead. Just pick it up. If you see it, just pick it up. It doesn't matter.
Actually, though, as much as I enjoy his work and as much as I enjoy Ed Pisker's work, I have never listened to comic book kayfabe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Actually.
Well, when cons are back, when cons happen again, come down to Heroes Con, because they almost always have a table together and several panels.
I've met them before. Yeah. Okay. All right. So again, spooky Halloween. We're gonna go over with our recommendations for books that spook us. So I will start. We'll just keep with this as we always do. Start with Steve. Steve, what is your Halloween pick for a scary book?
So my Halloween pick for a scary book is something that I actually first read over 20 years ago. When I was in college, moved up to Montreal. It's really interesting. They had a lot of different comic book stores that I hadn't really been exposed to, and of course, it's a bilingual city. But they also had a lot of French comic stores, so I got to find some cool bande dessinée, is French for comic book. And I picked up volume 1 of Cryozone, which is published out by Neopolis, which I don't even know if they're still in print, because this is way over 20 years ago. It's written by, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, Terry Kaito, with art by Denis Bergeron and Florence Breton on colors. And the interesting thing about Cryozone is that it really strikes me as very much an ode or an homage to 80s sci-fi horror. So it could have been straight out of the movies. This actually kind of plays like a film, which is pretty cool. So the concept of this is it's the future. It's 2060 or so. There's a colony ship, the Buzz Aldrin, not the Buzz Aldrin, the Neil Armstrong, that has about 9,600 colonists, and it's on its way to colonize the first out of solar system planet. And most of the people, most of the colonists, almost all of them, are in cryosleep, leaving the 400 crew members awake and running the ship. Well, it's the eve of, where they're just going to do the changing of the guard. The 400 strong team is going to go into cryosleep for the next 10 years or so of journey. And some other people are going to come out so that they can take their place for a little bit. And so there's a couple speeches, everybody's sort of celebrating, and then, shocker, there's a murder. And the interesting thing about this book, and I love the way that Kaito writes it, is that it's just twist, turn, shocking reveal, setup of a character, and then bang, the character that you think is going to be a main character gets killed off pretty quickly, or something happens and like your attention is completely redirected. But it is very much like an 80s sci-fi horror movie. You've got zombies, the people who are put in cryosleep, if they're taken out of cryosleep too soon, the fluid that's been sort of keeping them frozen and keeping them, in suspended animation becomes so toxic that it actually murders them all. It kills them. But because it revitalizes all cellular tissue, it then reanimates them, and, it destroys their brain at the same time. So they're just basically, wandering, munching zombies like usual. And then you also have the secreted away, secret company military presence, because it turns out, of course, that the corporation that's behind the whole the whole enterprise is corrupt and has an evil plan, and has secret military members that have been secreted away on the ship, who have been exposed to a very different type of chemical. This time, it's actually a virus that actually effectively makes them live forever and regenerate. But they're good guys. One is a good guy, but they're not zombies. So it's very interesting. There's a whole bunch of craziness. Essentially, the only character who survives the entire book, and it is a two-part series. The second part, which I only just found, I was able to get it off eBay last year. So for 20 years, I'd only read the first part. Finally got to read the second part. The only character that survives the whole time is Dr. Lisa Caron, who's like basically the ship's doctor. It's just exciting. It's fun. It's got a lot of humor. It's got a lot of craziness. There's a lot of betrayal. There's a lot of explosions, and a lot of misdirects. But it's fun. It's a great book. And if you read French, definitely pick it up, especially if you love zombies. And it's really fun. The art's pretty cool, and especially because in this world, the zombies continue to decompose. So they start off looking like normal people, and then by the towards the end of it, they're basically just walking skeletons and sacks of meat that are looking very and gross, and getting run over and exploded, and all sorts of things. But it's a lot of fun. It's exciting. I recommend it. It's goopy. It's got some gory bits. It's got some zombie chickens. Anyway, it's a hoot, but it's perfect for Halloween, especially if you love zombies and you love sci-fi. So
you had me at zombie chickens.
Zombie chicken.
Yeah. So has this ever been
I don't
translated
believe
to
it
your
has,
knowledge,
and
Steve?
that's disappointing because it's pretty fun. If you don't speak French and you don't want to spend the entire time scanning pages into Google Translate, the art's pretty expressive enough, so you can kind of follow along that way. If you do speak French though, and you like horror, sci-fi comics kind of stuff, or sci-fi movies from the 80s, this will be up your alley. If you liked Aliens, you'll like this.
All right, cool. All right, Bryan, do you have anything from people chatting in, or are you set to go with your next pick?
Nothing. It's all quiet on the Western Peanut Gallery.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I was really struggling. So mine is less of a recommendation, more of a that was a thing. So I was like, I know I've read some spooky stuff, but I again, as we've probably mentioned more than I probably mentioned this more than I need to. I got rid of most of my comics when I moved out here to Seattle, and I was looking at my shelves, and I'm like, nope, I got nothing. So I was going through DC because again, I'm trying to catch up, and I saw that they did a Legend of Swamp Thing Halloween spectacular, not just a Halloween special, Halloween anthology, a Halloween spectacular. Exactly. With the hand rainbow or whatever. All right, explosion. So I somewhere in my brain I had thought maybe we had mentioned this or we okay. So I was like, well, let's do it. Let's just do it. And I didn't sample it, like I just bought it on Comixology because that's what I get all my comics on now. And I started reading it, and I'm like, okay. The first story, the framing story, is by Ram V, who I don't know. Are you guys familiar with Ram V? Oh, Bill, you're muted.
Writer on Catwoman and Justice League Dark, possibly.
That would track.
Yeah, the Ram V, he is writing things currently for DC.
He is certainly writing things.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know from and that's my own, just not being clued in as much. But art by Mike Perkins. The art, I will say, from the framing story is pretty good. It fits the tone of what I think of as a again. Thank you, David. He is on Justice League Dark. It fits the framing, the tone of a Swamp Thing story, and so my history with Swamp Thing. The reason I even bothered with this is Alan Moore. Classic Swamp Thing run. I believe Gaiman has written Swamp Thing for a little, maybe just a few. Some other writers who I think fall within that British horror-ish fantasy. And then Scott Snyder, who I also really enjoyed as far as a very different, but I enjoyed it, I think, more than not. And that was back when he was still kind of crawling his way up into the DC world a bit. Hang on. The hand rainbows. So John, shout out to the hand rainbows. I'm glad. Okay, so you enjoyed it too, and I agree. The DC Universe show was canceled too soon, and Swamp Thing needs some love. But wait, hold on. Hot take.
There is a rumor about that.
Oh.
There's a rumor that they are scouting locations in the Orlando area because, again, that's a huge bunch of people that could be put to work. I imagine they would be getting tax breaks, and apparently there is some chatter about a second season on CW. But
it's done so well.
Hear it from me.
Okay,
it's done really, really well on CW when it premiered.
People, all you ever have to do is look at the audition notices. That's all you ever have to do.
Good tip there. So I think actually what you just said is a great idea because Orlando, with all of the untimely firings of all the entertainment people who work at Disney, or most of the face characters at least, I think that's quite an excellent suggestion. Framing story is pretty good, solid, about this little boy that gets lost in the woods. And this weeping willow, okay, old tree that sort of was involved in that a little adventure, is kind of talking to the Swamp Thing and it's like, well, tell us stories. Tell us of your homeworld, Usul. Like very, like let's wax poetic about stuff. And that's what, of course, delves us into this anthology book. So I will say that I enjoyed maybe every other story. The Ring of Stones explores a time in the Roman Empire when the Romans were invading Britain with an O, and the Celts ish tribes, and the Stonehenge shows up. It was pretty good. I didn't hate that one. I thought that was solid. Vita Ayala and Emma Rios, which Emma Rios, love her stuff. Vita Ayala, I think I've read some of his stuff, or their stuff, but I can't remember what I liked and what I didn't. Do you guys have any Vita Ayala favorites? Is that another? No, Steve's looking at me like kind of give me the face.
They are writing one of the.
We talked about them. Yes,
one of the X books right now.
This I knew in my head. I'm like, no, pronouns are wrong. Pronouns are wrong. They are. Yes, you're right. That's true. So that was good. It was a good story. It was about sort of gosh, I don't even know how to summarize it, but a little girl trying to free somebody and getting caught up in this kind of messed up situation. All of these so far, by the way, the Swamp Thing is pretty much a force of good. If you look at like in the Romans being kind of an invading empire, sort of standing up to the native people who worship them, worship the spirit of the forest kind of thing. And in that Vita Ayala story, of course, also trying to help the little girl, be freed, basically. No Sign of the Enemy is actually probably my favorite. Julian Lytle. It's about, because you probably heard of this story, right? There was a Japanese soldier on an island in the Pacific who was there for like decades after the end of the war, World War II. And finally, like, someone was like, they found them and they're like, hey, and they're like trying to kill them. Like the soldier who was stuck there thought they were part of the invading force, and it was a whole thing. So they take that as the idea and explore Swamp Thing as like the still small flower trying to convince this guy, hey, maybe you should go back to your family. You probably should move on. And then, hijinks ensue, right? I like that one. That one's pretty good. Then we get to James Tinian IV, who did Age of Discovery, and I didn't finish it. I love James a lot. I think his stuff is better. His independent stuff is very solid. I like it. His DC proper, I just have never got dialed into. Like, I've read it and I've been like, yep, all right, moving on. I just don't have much to, it doesn't resonate with me. But and Christian Ward doing art, which Christian Ward is one of those artists that like evolves and changes and has mutated over the years in directions I wouldn't expect, because he started with such a unique, interesting style. And I feel like he's taking more and more house gigs that are mainstream, and he's sort of fitting what he does into this kind of box. And sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes it works out really well. So other times I'm like, no, I don't. You should have gone crazier. You should have done your, other stuff. But, yeah. And then the last piece also is Ram V as well with Mike Perkins. So, like, overall, if you're a fan of Swamp Thing, and I think you like the Swamp Thing that is very force of nature, the Scott Snydery, the green, that whole thing, I think you're going to enjoy this. None of it's particularly like spooky, Halloweeny, even though it's the Halloween Spectacular. But I think if you're, like you say, you're into Swamp Thing, you're probably going to dig it. If you're more of the Alan Moore, like old school, and that's not even old school, honestly. That's like, Swamp Thing predates that by a while, right? A bit. But
that's like later period old school.
Yeah, later period old school. I don't know that it's going to work as well for you, even though that, that stuff isn't like making Swamp Thing out to be a dick. But I think that one, I think Alan Moore and some of the writers and some of the earlier stuff, it kind of takes them in darker directions. And I kind of wish this had been a little more of that, because if it's going to be a Halloween Spectacular, I really want it to be a little dark. It doesn't have to be glitter. As much as I like glitters and rainbows, like of course, obvi. I just want a little more darkness in my horror comics, and Swamp Thing I think of as a horror comic. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it.
Okay, cool. It's in my next box, so I haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, I'll probably read it at some point. Vita Ayala, I finally remembered what I had read them or read some of their stuff. Livewire from Valiant, a couple the latest volumes of Livewire. Vita Ayala wrote. So, yeah, I mean, I think of Swamp Thing as a horror comic, but I think out of the New 52, and I think after Scott Snyder got off of it and Charles Soule took over, he started to fishtail into sort of more fantasy, less horror, not even conventional storytelling. It's just, I think there was sort of more of a mainstreaming of Swamp Thing that happened over the past 10 years that I think is, it's nice because I think Swamp Thing gets more exposure and not the kind of exposure that came from a couple cult classic movies. Hey, I have to say, they're cult classic movies. Adrienne Barbeau, and I think who was Heather Locklear in the second one or something. And of course, there was the USA Channel TV series that lasted for a couple of years.
And the 5-episode cartoon series.
And the cartoon series. But that was kind of like the last time that Swamp Thing got mainstreamed, and I think they lost a lot because it became just campy. Whereas when Alan Moore was writing, it was campy.
It was campy on the basis that the live action show was low budget. So there were some things that got, probably didn't get their proper due because of the budget restrictions. But if you watch that series, there's some remarkably dark episodess.
Well, I mean, anything with Arcane,
I would say if there's the campy, the campiness that was particularly in the second movie. I mean, it's just straight out, But
yeah.
And again, I'll always maintain the Batman TV series was the only time straight camp has ever worked. You need fam to really do it right.
We got some comments here.
Yeah.
John Martin, what up from the Viking Prince Volton? Which I don't.
Hey, John.
That thing. That's a thing. Is that his thing?
It certainly is.
Billy, John loves his rumors.
Yes. Just be aware that in Variety there was an ad for a show that would be shooting in Orlando called Abby for pre-production production assistance.
Yep.
So to me, that says something.
And Orlando is great for swamp. There's lots of that. Lots of good swamp locations outside the city. So David, thank you so much because I am actually interested in this more now. Ram V is an Indian writer and did These Savage Shores, which evidently is a spooky story about it's a flip colonial narrative about a vampire from England who travels to India and finds there are darker things than vampires there. Great description.
Perfect for spooky October.
I will definitely be checking that out. Also, James is either saying good night or hello. I'm not sure. Good night.
Then we shall say aloha.
There we go.
Aloha, James.
Also, Ram V did. I was right. They are credited with 6 issues of Catwoman. I'm saying they. I'm sure it's a he. Whatever.
We'll go with they.
We'll go with they. All right. So just before we proceed, this isn't the first time we've had a horror-tinged episode. We enjoyed talking about horror so much with John Horsley when he was on here talking about the Ainz anthology that Steve and I later did a horror-themed episode, and I just want to read the books that we covered then. EC Comics of the 1950s, Hellboy and the Magnoliverse, Sandman, Lucifer, Swamp Thing, The Sixth Gun, The Devilers, which was this awesome unfortunately forgotten Dynamite series.
Yeah.
Hellblazer, Torso, Baltimore, and Black Eyed Kids. So
BEK, freaky.
So if you want to refer back to that episode, that's almost a year and a half old at this point, which is freaking me out. You can listen to that for some other horror recommendations. I go much farther back than the two of you have gone. Not quite so far as the EC comics, but pretty far back. As a result of the institution of the Comics Code Authority in the mid 1950s, and which basically ended horror books for a long, long time in mainstream comics. A lot of the books that major publishers had out, DC had House of Mystery and House of Secrets, they gradually became more science fiction tinged books. Marvel as well, they had a title, Strange Tales became much more science fiction. Journey into Mystery was a horror tinged book that again became more science fiction. So that was the trend, from the late 50s into the 60s. There was a big horror renaissance in the mid 60s, mainly because of local television had a lot of chiller theater type of shows with local hosts and rerunning the old Universal Monsters and other types of films along those lines. And it was that atmosphere that eventually led to the Comics Code Authority kind of easing restrictions. You couldn't have werewolves, you couldn't have zombies, you couldn't have vampires. There were things you weren't allowed to have in a mainstream comic unless you're Jimmy Olsen and like, oh, he wasn't really a vampire. So there were things that you could get around it a little bit, but for the most part, horror was kind of banned. On the comics front, Warren magazines published Eerie and Creepy, which were massive hits in the mid 60s. So this didn't go unnoticed by publishers like DC and Golke and Charlton and later Marvel. Charlton was probably the first on the bandwagon to take advantage of some of the lessened rules for the Comics Code Authority, but it really exploded with DC in 1968. They House of Mystery at that time was basically a superhero series, and some other series had been canceled. And from 1968 to the end of the 70s, actually, you just had an influx of a lot of horror anthology books on DC's end. There were some books that were character based, like Phantom Stranger, and naturally, as we were talking about, Swamp Thing. But for the most part, they were anthologized series. Later on, some of the series had characters like iVampire and Creature Commandos, but that's a later time. So the book that I'm going to recommend is Showcase Presents The House of Mystery, Volume 1. And again, this, it's the first 21 issues of the revived House of Mystery as a horror book. Some of the creators that are in this volume are Neil Adams, Jack Kirby, Bernie Wrightson, Alex Toth, more on him later. Gil Kane, Wally Wood, Al Williamson, Sergio Aragonis. Some of the writers are Jerry Conway and Len Wein and Marv Wolfman. Definitely all-stars, even names that are still revered today. And one of the big criticisms about the Showcase Presents series is because these are, the telephone black and white books. I think some of these stories are much more effective in black and white compared to color. There are series under the Showcase Presents, like particularly Green Lantern and Legion of Superheroes, where it's just not as an effective read. But when it comes to particularly the Westerns and the horror, I honestly think it's a better experience. It's a better reading experience. Some of these volumes have gone out of print. There are also Showcase Presents for House of Mystery and Secrets of Sinister House and Ghosts and Weird War Tales, The Witching Hour, these great anthology series. The conceit in House of Mystery, as it eventually gelled, was that Cain of Cain and Abel ran the House of Mystery. He was the proprietor. And it was kind of a host. almost like a horror television host. There would be sometimes framing sequences, or at least an introductory splash page that may tie some of the stories together, or just at least set the tone. As time went on, first Alan Moore, and then much more definitively Neil Gaiman fleshed out Cain and Abel and Destiny and some of these other host characters as characters, beyond their purposes as the introductory host. But and again, a lot of these stories are, still in that O. Henry surprise ending twist vein. Sometimes you can see them come a mile away. Sometimes the last panel is a genuine shock. But this is my recommendation for stories that, despite being 50 years old, still can freak you out a little bit. So Showcase presents House of Mystery. Have you guys ever read any of that stuff? The DC horror stuff, that was the anthology based stuff from the 70s and 80s? Nope. Okay.
Really, I think
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I think now that I know better from your review that it connects in with the Sandman stuff, I think I didn't make that connection.
Yeah. You won't get narratives that link into that, but I think
it's just
you by reading this stuff,
no.
You'll see where Swamp Thing came from. Yeah.
I feel like the problem I always have with horror is it just isn't the genre that I'm first drawn to in movies, TV, comics, anything. But I think in comics, I like that it's such a huge part of our history in comics. And I am more interested, I think, because of that.
I think, I've read some here and there, nothing too crazy. Obviously, I've read, the early issues, or the early appearances of Swamp Thing, which I think was House of
Secrets. Yeah, it was initially a one-off story in House of Secrets that sold incredibly well.
And it was one of those two.
Yep.
Yeah, because you have the House of Mystery, which is Cain, and the House of Secrets, which is Abel. And of course, tied together later on, 20 some years later with Sandman and Neil Gaiman. But House of Mystery, and actually all of those anthology series, recently, within the past 10 years, DC has released some sort of throwback one-shots, kind of referring to that. So a couple of years ago, you had witches and ghosts, were brought back just sort of as just, extra size one-shot specials. And they stayed pretty true, I think, to that kind of idea of like, here's a horror anthology. There's a bunch of, interesting stories that don't really tie together, but they're, they don't have to. They're just really interesting, kind of thought-provoking stories, or maybe, like a cheap scare kind of thing. House of Mystery has been revived at least once before as a completely different series, as a Vertigo series that I thought was fantastic, actually. Sturgis. And who else worked on that one? I think you can get all 8 volumes now. It's an amazing story. Kind of does, fit into the Sandman universe a little bit. But it's definitely a really cool story if you're into that. And I'm trying to think if House of Secrets got revived other than just a special.
On mute. There was a Vertigo series. I don't think it lasted nearly as long as House of Mystery, but there was one.
It did get collected. I do remember it. It was a single story. I think it pulled it. Like, I guess a character got pulled into the House of Secrets, and she was, kind of an orphan or something like that, and just kind of experienced the weirdness of the house. But it inspired quite a bit down the road in Vertigo. Maybe just the concepts or the characters of Cain and Abel, but still, I think it's really interesting that it lasted so long and that the references still are out there. And still pop up. But
another character that came out of this period that has had legs is Madame Xanadu, who was initially the host of Doorway to Nightmare. So they've had developments in these horror books that have been sustained. Also, just want to get out there that on the DC Universe service, soon to be DC Universe Infinite, that there are a number of the 70s horror books that you can sample there. So
Awesome.
So good stuff, spooky stuff.
Spoopy.
All right. Before we get to the Wolves of the Week, is there anything anyone wants to get in before we?
More comments here.
Sure.
John, of course, talking about needing to check out Savage.
Yeah, that does
Shores.
sound pretty cool. Savage Shores.
Also, agreeing the comics code sucked. I think we can all agree with that. And then James, the Showcase Essential books are amazing, and the glorious black and white, which I will say, I did not love that at first, but the more I think I've seen of that, and I've gotten since a little more hip to that, I agree.
Yeah.
Especially
And like I
era.
said, there's some stuff that works better than others. I like having them just for the quick read. And it is a program I wish they had kept, at least to get through the Silver and Bronze Age. At least for each of those series, because there's there's so many Superman stories that have never been reprinted. There's a lot of gaps there, as though there have been very very concerted reprint programs. I thought this was a way that they would get everything out there, in some fashion if people wanted to sample it, pretty much on the cheap. But unfortunately, it is a program that did end. But go to Ollie's.
You can find, go to Ollie's. I was just gonna say, it's like you can find them all at Ollie's for like $2.
All right. Okay, so if there's no other comments, and if you guys don't have anything, we can move on to the Wolves of the Week segment. And if you are a longtime viewer or a first-time viewer, we'll give you the lowdown here. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at them, or grr, or rar. Any others? Rar. Grr. Woof. So, we have a counterpart to that on our show, where we provide every week the Wolves of the Week, where we signify something that doesn't necessarily have to be a comic book. It can be it can be a film, it can be a film or a TV program or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your Wolf of the Week?
Well, I kind of alluded to my Wolf of the Week earlier in the show, but I decided to flip through Netflix yesterday, Wednesday, the 27th of October, and came across Sarah Cooper's Everything's Fine. And this is basically a 50-minute special on Netflix that stars the titular Sarah Cooper, who's a comedian who's showed up on, you may have seen her on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. She's famous for making a lot of videos where she lip syncs to Trump speeches while making interesting faces or just, having conversations with, Trump fictionally conversing with himself. And very, very funny, but also goes a lot more beyond that. And this show, the special, was a great way to highlight Sarah's writing ability and her humor, and also a pretty amazing cast. Everybody's in this special. You've got Maya Rudolph as as a meteorologist that's slowly going crazy. You've got Winona Ryder makes an appearance. Helen Mirren shows up. Jonathan Ness from Queer Eye appears. You've got just some Megan Thee Stallion. You've got some really great characters and actors that appear in the special. And the whole conceit of it is Sarah hosts a morning program called Everything's Fine, where it's just news and she riffs on stuff kind of like headline news. And it just gets wild and crazy, all about 2020, all about the wildness that's there. And possibly may or may not actually be broadcast from hell, where they're deciding to put all of the crazy disasters that should have probably happened spread out all in 2020. So I highly recommend it. It's available on Netflix as of today in the US.
And when you had mentioned it before, there was something about Karens.
Oh, Karens, yes. Whoopi Goldberg narrates a documentary about the history of Karens in the United States.
Awesome.
There's Karens over there, there's Karens over there, there's Karens goddamn everywhere. Brilliant,
Awesome.
brilliant stuff.
That's one of my unfortunate rabbit holes I go down occasionally is the Karen videos. There's some crazy shit out.
It's equally frustrating and hilarious at the same time. And infuriating. That's many things.
All right, over to Bryan. Bryan, what is your wolf of the week?
So I have a quick and a slightly less quick one. Our good friend Justin Hall is part of a comics group of creators in the Bay Area, and they are doing a comics anthology magazine called The Baileys. Issue number 1 is out on Kickstarter, and they are looking for your backing. If you are listening live, you have very little time, 18 hours. If you are listening to this not live, you've probably already missed out. But they I'm sure will find another way to release this, even if you missed the Kickstarter deadline. So I wouldn't worry too much. But if you're interested, I would say get there and support. That is the quick one. It is exactly what you think it is. The longer one, and it's not long, but I have to bring to the world's attention that an institution is closing in Orlando. The world famous Parliament House, which has been open for, I know it's 44, 45 years. I probably should have looked, but in that ballpark, as a gay resort in Orlando, if you've ever been there, and I know, I think both of you have been there, correct? Okay.
Not with you, but I've been there.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we went to Stonewall for some reason. I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah, I've been there with you, actually.
That was because of the karaoke.
Oh, yes. So Parliament House is a big part of my life. It's a big part of a lot of people who've been in Orlando's lives, especially if you're out, but not just for people who are gay and lesbian and in the LGBTQIA spectrum. It is a magical place. I've got so many stories and so many memories, and most of which were with my previous boyfriend, Pat from the Bears in the City, who just had his virtual bear bust. In case I should have. I think it came on very quickly, but it was the first time virtual for that event. But it is another part of the Parliament House legacy that will hopefully live on. The idea here is they are not obviously the property is going to go back to the people who own it. The people who run the Parliament House lost that a while ago. But I think it's actually been an albatross around their necks more than anything, because there's so much debt roiled into that whole situation that a clean start, though admittedly maybe not right away, is probably for the best. But it is a special place and a magical experience that if you have not had a chance to experience, well, you got until November 1st for the last dance there. And I know when I go back to Orlando, I'm going to be a little sad if I drive by that area and it's been bulldozed and turned into a Home Depot or something, which is inevitably the way of things. But I am excited for my friends that are still working there, or in theory will be working at the new location once they sort that out. And there is a hot rumor that it will be a little closer to other spots in the downtown area that are gay and lesbian centric. So I'm excited for what hopefully will come of this. Hopefully it gives them a chance to reinvent themselves. But yeah, so pour one out for your homies at the Parliament House. They will be greatly missed.
Okay. For my wolf of the week, full disclosure, I won a trivia contest. And the prize was the Space Ghost and Dino Boy collection on Blu-ray. If you're unfamiliar with Space Ghost, it basically was the first time we had a superhero outside of comic books, for all intents and purposes. Began being broadcast in 1966 on CBS. The character designs were by Alex Toth. And another bit of full disclosure, I am a distant relative of Alex Toth. So yes, my Aunt Shirley was married to Jack Toth, who was a cousin of Alex Toth. I wish I knew this when Alex Toth was alive. This came to light a couple of years ago. part of the special features is an excellent documentary because, again, this was issued on DVD previously. Is a documentary called Simplicity: The Life and Art of Alex Toth, which has a lot of comic book luminaries like Ruben Percipio and Bruce Timm is in it, and Mark Chiarello, who used to be the art director for DC Comics. Excellent documentary about the man. And Space Ghost led to other series that Hanna-Barbera had produced, like Birdman and the Galaxy Trio and Shazam, Mighty Mightor, these really cool 60s superheroes that were taking some of the tropes, particularly what was going on in Marvel. DC also as well, but again, there's a lot of Green Lantern and Space Ghost. But again, those were kind of reserved for the comic books up until this time. You didn't have it apart from the Superman series that premiered that same year in cartoons on network TV. So this is my Wolf of the Week. I urge you all to check it out. Before we wrap up the show for good, though, we neglected to go around with what we were wearing today, and this wasn't. I should have put an edict that it should have been like a Halloweeny spooky thing, but some of us did, some of us didn't. But still, I think how we are attired is definitely worth mentioning. Start with Steve. Steve, what are you wearing?
It's hard to tell, and this is one of those things where if only the room could get completely dark. But this is a glow-in-the-dark Weeping Angel shirt from Doctor Who, where here's the Weeping Angel. When the lights are out, it's the Weeping Angel attacking. And it actually is a very awesome picture. I'm just going to have to tell you about it because you can't see it. Sorry. It's too bright.
Okay. Moving over to Bryan. Bryan, what are you wearing?
So I went with the Halloween is not so much just a spooky thing, but also a chance to dress up. I got my my very sailor-looking, sea captain-looking red knit cap very recently, and this is part of my obvious transformation into a salty sea captain. And I also am wearing my Pacific Northwest, representing the most sort of surreal, abstract-looking graphic from the anarchist jurisdiction that I live in. So that's my Halloween outfit. Yay!
Awesome. For mine, I have this like really cheap glow-in-the-dark skull T-shirt. I couldn't find it. I don't know where it is. So this was where I thought it was. This is the cover of Kiss's album Destroyer, and I figured that was Halloweeny enough. I also have something I want to bring up that if anyone watching, not listening, because if you're listening, you're going to have to go look at the video for this. DC has an artist that is doing a lot of their licensed materials right now. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out who this artist is. This is a Batman cup, if you can see there. And, it's very classic, streamlined, superheroic type of deal. If you were eating / collecting the Hershey candy bars, he or she also did the art there, and this is the Aquaman.
Ooh.
That is part of that. So this is just this really classic superhero looking stuff. It's not Paul Pelletier. It's not Umberto. I mean, Joe Quinones, like all these kind of suspects. When you look at their art closely, it doesn't match what's here. So if anybody knows who this artist is, I'd love to know, because their stuff is appearing on a lot of DC's licensed material now, and it's just a style I really like. So if you know, and like I gotta say, like if I don't know it, it's a mystery.
So yeah, before we wrap up too, we have our good friend James, who I did not realize had a comic out today or recently. So Halloween Man Special number 9, written by Drew Edwards and drawn by our very own, I'm calling you our own here, James.
Yes.
James Figueredo is up on Comixology. I actually so in Comixology, I saw Halloween Man. I don't know if I would have picked this specific special, but I did see it and thought,
I am so buying that right after this.
Yes, me too. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the heads up on that, James. Thank you so much. Now it makes sense because he had sent an invite about Halloween Man out. And while I was working, I thought, "Oh, I'll look at it later." I never did. And okay, we'll definitely
That's
check
awesome.
that out. Thank you. That is, and congrats.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, James.
All right.
I do have one last thing I did want to pop up here. It's kind of also a subwoof as well. My brother-in-law Curtis Estrada, picked this up for me down in Florida. They actually have apparently at one of the locations, one of the bars down there, they do these regular auctions, and he was able to get something. This is actually a I believe it's an handmade etched symbol onto this table with just different Marvel figures. The maker of that is a S&D Zines, which is a company that does a lot of these sort of bespoke and or designed kind of pieces. But I definitely wanted to thank him for that, and also just show how cool it was. It's pretty awesome.
That's really awesome.
No, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to wrap this one up. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears Podcast. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. If you want to write to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. If you want to listen to us, you can download us through iTunes. Please leave a review if you're enjoying what you're hearing. You can also catch us through Stitcher Radio and many of the other podcasting platforms. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a review there too if you're digging what you're seeing. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Bryan Pittard.
And I'm Steve Morey.
You're going to hear Wolf and an Explosion. We'll be back real soon. And if you haven't and you're in the States, for God's sake, vote. For God's sakes. So, goodbye, everybody. And hopefully we will see you in an entirely new world next week. Take care.
Otherwise, get ready for a real shit show.